What's up, friends? We're back with another Warhammer Old World Almanac Monday update, and this week they have revealed the psychology phase. So they have given us actually quite a bit of information in this one. It didn't seem at first like there was a lot of information, but there's a lot of little sort of tidbits about how it's going to break down. So they kind of start off with going over like a repeat of last week with sort of like the sort of combat resolution results and how they lead to breaking and pursuing. So as we remember, if you pass your modified leadership when you lose combat, you only give ground, which means you are now, they've kind of just told you you push back 2 inches. And it seems like you're basically ready to fight again. You can kind of do whatever you want. Everything's kind of good. That's what you want if you're going to lose to have happen. If you pass your leadership stat but fail your modified leadership test, you will fall back in good order. So you roll 2d6, you discard the lowest die, and then you basically get an automatic reform and you're ready to fight again. We remember from last week that if you're pursued, they do get to count as charging again. So that one's not quite as good, but still better than the third one, which is going to be break and flee. So if you fail your leadership stat altogether, you are running for the hills. You're going to basically roll 2d6 directly away from what they call the highest unit strength opponent you were fighting. Now, there's a lot of nuance in there that they're kind of not talking about it for good reason in an article. So we're going to kind of figure that out later when we get a clear picture of the rules. Is it center to center like it used to be? Is there a bit of like choice in sort of direction when it says directly away? Like what does directly necessarily mean? So they have to clarify that obviously still, but we can kind of assume directly. You know, you measure through the units and kind of go from there. It'll probably be pretty similar to 8th edition. Unit strength is back. Obviously, this might be the first time they've mentioned unit strength. So before, previously, units had a strength based usually on numbers, but bigger things like ogres or trolls or stuff like that, even giants got a unit strength category, and that usually for things like this, for fleeing or it mattered sometimes with combat res or things like fear they're going to talk about later. Unit strength mattered. So they go on to talk about what happens when you run away. So if you flee, like scary flee, we failed our leadership stat flee. We run away 2d6 and your opponent chooses to pursue. They will roll their 2d6, and just like before, it is brutal and bloody. You are wiped out if you are caught. If you touch the table edge, you are wiped out. If you run through an enemy unit while fleeing, you're going to take damage, probably massive damage. And if you run through a friendly unit, it sounds like you're going to bounce like you used to do. They didn't quite say this, but I'm just making a bit of an assumption based on what they said, because it leaves the other unit vulnerable. So it sounds like you're going to bounce over top like you used to, which can lead to some dangerous situations too, where your unit just gets like cross-fired off the board through a couple of units. So like there's going to be all that sort of stuff back with fantasy again. The next part is they kind of go into all the psychology stuff. So fear, terror, animosity, frenzy, unbreakable, stubborn, hatred, all those things we used to know are all back. And they've kind of said they've used the word universal special rule. So like they're making a deliberate attempt to clean up the game a little bit, have things just be universal and be easily referenced in the book. And hopefully that means there's not too many faction-specific rules, and it's more using the universal rules. We've seen this in the newest edition of Horus Heresy, the Age of Darkness rules. They've done a good job of universalifying like a lot of the rules, and in the current edition of 40k as well. These we like universal special rules. It's good. It makes things clean and tidy, and it's easy to reference, and it's also easy to remember these things as we keep playing. They kind of show off the profile of a Shaggoth, which is kind of interesting. So it's our first glimpse at a like monster or unit, and he's got a pile of special rules. So that's going to be interesting. I was like, wow, that's a lot of special rules. He has a Shaggoth, so that's kind of fun. He's got things like Armor Bane, which we have no idea what that does yet. Armored Hide, I can only assume, and it had brackets next to it. So there's going to be these scaling values, and we've seen that in Horus Heresy too. So I imagine it's probably +2 to his armor save, something like that. If he's got Armored Hide 1, maybe it's only +1 to his armor save. And Armor Bane, bracket 2, maybe it's like an extra rend on top of his weapon or something like that. We'll wait and see about that. Or maybe he'll have like a special damage to attack certain units. And they said Stomp attacks are back. So he's got Stomp attacks D3+1, which is kind of cool. So Stomp attacks are back from 8th edition, which is kind of, I always like Stomp attacks. It felt right that like big monsters and ogres and things like that, when they're fighting littler things, get like to push them around a little bit more, which I thought was kind of cool. So that's back. And then they kind of hinted a little bit about like fear and terror, just to give us a clear picture of how powerful those rules are going to be. So they talk about fear. It sounds like you're going to need to pass a leadership test to charge a fear-causing unit. And if you have to pass a leadership test every round when you're fighting a fear unit, and -1 to hit if you fail. So that's, I believe it was -1 weapon skill in 8th edition. Like I remember fear being not particularly great in 8th edition, like being kind of, and it's nice to see a pretty powerful ability back in. So fear will be pretty scary again. Like not being able to charge something or being -1 in combat is going to be devastating. And then terror is pretty cool. It's, if you, once again, it's back with the, not the terror bomb, but like kind of the terror bomb. If you charge a unit with a terror causing unit, they have to pass a leadership test, or they flee, going right to flee. So terror will be really powerful again, especially against armies with like mid or low leadership values. Once again, like I was saying last week, the leadership stat seems like it's going to be more important than ever in Old World. Yay, elves, if you play elves. Terror, so yeah, and then -1 static to your leadership. So it sounds like there's going to be either a bubble, or if you're in combat with a terror-causing unit, you're just at a -1 leadership modifier while you're fighting or around that. And I like that. That's cool. I think the modifiers add some more nuance to it, and it's going to make breaking sort of like dwarves or things like that a little easier if you're playing one of those armies. So that's kind of cool to see. So what do you think about psychology? Do you think it's going to be impactful enough? And does the sort of combat resolution stuff, is it starting to make a little more sense now? I think it is to me. It was a little confusing at first, but I'm glad I'm kind of understanding a little bit more. And it seems I like that they've added sort of like a third in between step now, because it used to just be like pass or fail, and the failing was brutal and the passing was great, like nothing happened. So there's a little bit more kind of like a middle ground. You can fail a little bit, and I think the pushback to interesting is interesting too, even if you pass your test, because and I wonder if this is kind of the hinting at there, maybe there'll be some more objective sort of like things in the missions, where like you're trying to push somebody off of a center hill or something like that, and winning combat will matter in those situations, which is kind of cool. So all I can ask is that you like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be back this Wednesday with some more Old World talk. Thanks so much for listening. Take care, guys.